Hello, and welcome to the Pragmatic Live podcast series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I'm Rebecca Kalogeris, Vice President of Marketing and Product Strategy at Pragmatic Institute, and your host for this episode. Today, we are very excited to have on Francisco Bram, Head of Product and Growth Marketing at Uber Eats. Welcome, Francisco.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here.
So I have to tell you, Uber Eats is a brand I know very well, not just in the pandemic, but it certainly did raise its profile in the house. But can you start just give me a little bit of background on you and your role and kind of path to how you got where you are with Uber Eats today?
Absolutely. I basically am European. I was born and raised in Portugal, but very early in my life, I inherited the gene of the discovery period, and I wanted to just go abroad and live and experience other cultures. So I lived in Russia, Spain, England, Germany, and for the last 12 years, I've been in the United States. I started my career in marketing at an actual textile company back in the day, helping them go to trade shows and fairs and helping them design a booth. I studied marketing at the university, and then I decided that this is something I am really passionate about, and I want to keep driving my growth in this field. And so I was lucky enough that I was able to be part of multiple different industries, from pharmaceuticals to medical devices to AI technology to currently Uber, and even within Uber, I've been part of Uber for Business, Uber Health, and now Uber Eats. And so it's been a wonderful career so far, and I'm really grateful for all the opportunities.
Great. We are so excited to have you on. Okay, so one of the things, having done this show for several years, that I think is really interesting is how different people define product marketing, right? People can have that same role and it's defined very differently. So maybe if you could give us your definition of product marketing and also sort of why you think it plays such a critical role in organizations.
That is a great question. And I can attest to that in fact, product marketing has different definitions across different companies. I know Apple, Siemens, Uber, they all define it differently, but the core of product marketing, in my opinion, is the same. And so my simple definition would be product marketing is the art of taking the right product to the right audience at the right time. So that would be the simplest way of saying it. Of course, product marketing is a bit more complex than that, in a sense that we should be representing our customers. We should be the voice of customer. In a way, we should help an organization to develop solutions, services, and innovations that truly meet customer needs, and then help marketing organizations launch those solutions in a way that raises awareness, drives conversion, and product usage. So we really kind of play a dual role of inbound and outbound marketing. Inbound, bringing in customer insights; outbound, making sure customers are aware of the solutions we have that will address their pain points.
Absolutely. And I think one of the fun pieces of the role too is that it's ever evolving, right? Getting the voice of the customer is certainly not a one-time thing, and obviously being the voice of the product's not. So it's an ongoing cycle. And as the more we bring in the customer, the more we affect the product, and the more natural those conversations can go back out.
That's right. And fun fact, not a lot of people know this, but the very first definition of marketing in the United States was in the mid 1800s, when Tiffany's released their first mail catalog called the Tiffany's Blue Book. And it was pure product marketing. It was a catalog that featured the product with a value proposition, price, and it was positioned based on the different audiences. Eventually, Sears took that over, and Sears became known for having their famous Sears catalogs. And it was, again, pure product marketing. How do we feature products? How do we make sure that the audiences understand the value of the product and they're willing to pay for a price?
I did not know that. And what's really interesting about that as well is you've got the same technique, let's say, being used very differently for two companies because they have very different products and particularly very different audiences, right? I mean, the Blue Book from Tiffany's, well, I imagine, right? At least if they did one today, would be so different than the Sears catalog, right? Because even where there was overlap in products, those audiences are very different.
That's right, and that is exactly the point. Like the core product marketing doesn't change, but you're absolutely right to say that the evolution of product marketing um, has accelerated in recent years. In fact, if you think about the history of marketing, from the first catalog, it took another 50 years until suddenly we started seeing radio ads, and then it took another 20 years until we started getting outdoor advertisement, and then another 10 years you got TV ads. And then finally, you got telemarketing. And then you hit the late 90s, and suddenly it explodes. With the internet, social media, and smartphones, you now have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. You have blogs. You have account-based marketing. You have what we called performance-based marketing. So suddenly it became hyper-specialized marketing. Instead of being a general marketing manager 20 years ago, that would be a title. Today, there's no such thing. Today, you're like either a performance marketer, a CRM marketer, you're a social media marketer, you are either a PR and media marketer, and then you have product marketing. And the product marketing, I think, plays a critical role in today's world because you're kind of the conductor of this orchestra, right? You have, like, if you think about an orchestra, you have the cello player, you have the violinist. If they all play at their own tune, you're going to get a lot of noise and not a real true symphony. So the role of product marketing is, how do we create a campaign with a consistent tone of voice, a consistent design, look and feel, and how do we leverage all of these specialized marketers to tell that story well, in a consistent way. And I think that's really how product marketing has evolved from pure product marketing to now becoming kind of the architect of a go-to-market plan.
I like that analogy of the orchestra, right? And you're, and I think it's particularly important because it's like there's all these new instruments, there's all these new tactics, and then each individual tactic is evolving so quickly, right? So staying an expert in that specific field. And product marketing needs to stay as an expert in the product and the audience, and in a way that they can translate those so that all of those different tactics excel.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about that role then. Our conductors. What makes, in your mind, the very best product marketing folks?
Yeah, I actually I read an article back in, I believe it was like late 90s. I think it was written by Ben Horowitz from the famous VC capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. And he wrote a piece about what makes a good PM and a bad PM, like a product manager and a bad product manager. And that inspired me to actually write a manifesto for my team, which is what I call the 10 commandments of great product marketers. And so there are really 10 things in my mind, and I'll be very brief in each one of them. Like number one, great PMMs. And so I'm referring PMMs as product marketers. They embrace data. So they understand how to leverage research and market data to uncover user insights. They truly embrace this data to help drive product roadmap decisions and drive effective marketing campaigns. Bad PMMs, they think this is the responsibility of R&D, product management, or UXR, and they often assume Google Stats is enough. The second element is they're great design thinkers. Great PMMs understand that great products require great marketing-driven insights. And they understand that marketing starts with product discovery, experimentation, piloting, and then finally rolling it out. Bad PMMs think their role begins only when the product is ready to launch. The third element is they are product experts. Like great PMMs really get deep into the product. They want to be able to demo the product. They want to be able to understand it to a point that they become dangerous enough that they can actually then start to challenge even product managers. Bad PMMs don't think they need to know how to demo a product. That's not their responsibility. 4, they own and are accountable for go-to-market. That means they drive the go-to-market process, the plan and execution, and they really understand all the different parts of marketing and sales, and they can actually coordinate all these different elements. So they really are the architects of it. The bad PMM basically thinks project managers should manage the go-to-market process. They're only there to help drive value proposition and narratives. Number 5, and this is one of my favorites, they are great storytellers. That's really what makes a great PMM, is the ability to take something that could be very complex and then be able to distill that information into a memorable, reproducible, and inspiring product story. Bad PMMs, they simply use like technical product explanations, and a lot of the times it feels like manuals and not really great storytelling. Number 6, they're great brief writers. They know that a great brief helps other teams in marketing to drive inspirational work. So they know how to write a great brief that will ultimately inspire an agency, or will inspire internal teams to rally behind their plan and do their best work. Bad PMMs, they often think that a brief is actually a strategy plan with all the tactics that you want to do, and often it misses the mark. Number 7, they measure success. Great PMMs, they know that measurement is key to demonstrate business impact. And bad PMMs think measurement is not their responsibility. They often come up with excuses that, oh, not everything can be measured. Number 8, they're visionaries. Great PMMs craft the vision for the success of the product. And they do not build a go-to-market plan on the launch moment, but instead a series of campaign building blocks that drive long-term product growth. Bad PMMs, they think about the short term. Like, we have a launch date, we're going to launch the product, and then after the product is launched, they move on to the next one without really sort of following through on the success of the product. Number 9, they have grit. PMMs really are able to work with senior executives on Monday, and on Tuesday, check their ego and take on the dirty entry-level work that normally is reserved for entry-level people, but they do it because they want to get things done. They're driven by action. While bad PMMs often don't take initiative, they wait to be told what to do, and they often delegate a lot of the work to entry-level people. Finally, the last one is they are player coaches. Great PMMs are mentors, always looking to share best practice, help others grow. And the best praise that a PMM can get is a compliment on the success of a campaign, not a success of himself. While bad PMMs often, they forget sometimes when to give credit to others, and they measure themselves based on, executive feedback as opposed to the success of cross-collaboration work. So those are the 10 commandments, I would say, what really drives great PMMs.
Those are great. Can we dig in on a few of those?
Of course.
All right. I'm going to try to just keep to a few, so one of the ones that you talked about is a brief. And before we dig into here, I think what you've described there in those sort of 10 commandments of great PMM is spot on. And it's very much a reflection of what we've seen of sort of the shift in product marketing over the last 10 years, but particularly accelerated maybe in the last 5, to really being a more strategic player coming in earlier in the process. So I love seeing that live with your team. I've been excited to see it alive with some of the other companies we've worked with, like IBM. And it's really neat to see the elevation of a role that has so much impact when it's done well.
Mm-hmm.
But so you talked about a little bit about the creative brief or the brief that you guys use. Talk to me about what do you think are the key elements of that brief that are so necessary to giving him the information needed, but also that do inspire, as you said.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I could basically call out the 3 pillars of a great brief, and then of course there's a lot more that goes into the specifics, but there are 3 great pillars, like 3 key pillars of a great brief, and those are: number 1, start with a why. Like, why are we even thinking about a plan, thinking about a launch, thinking about a campaign? And that is really where you bring in insights. Like, a brief should always be grounded on a deep understanding of your target audience. And that's really the why. The why is there a problem today that we think we can address? Why is this important to our target audience? What insights do we have based on research, based on market data, based on our user base that truly validate the why for this brief? The why is also the most inspiring part. It's really, if you nail the why, you actually already from the get-go, you're getting everyone else who's reading the brief to get excited about the plan and learning more about the next section of your brief, which is the how. So now that you explain, we have a problem. Our customers are, for example, not satisfied with the current service. This is what we learn about it. This is the areas based on the customer journey that we built, the gaps that currently exist that we can address. The how is, how are we addressing them? So what are we doing to addressing these problems? Are we launching a new product? Are we launching a new service? Are we launching a new campaign just to raise awareness? It's really basically where you articulate the solution to the problem highlighted in the first section. Then the third section is the what, really. What are the benefits that your solution will provide to your customers? What is the timeline for launching this product? What are the key metrics that you're going to measure the success of your particular approach, solution, product, campaign? This is where you basically summarize in terms of what is the ask that we're making to these teams. So at a high level, and I know this seems very high level and abstract, any good brief really is based on these three pillars: the why, the how, and the what. Now, of course, if you deep dive into the actual brief template, there's a lot of different sections, specifically around the what. Like I said, the what will incorporate your timeline, will incorporate the specific value proposition. Like, what is the value proposition? What is your timeline? What is the channel strategy? What is the ask you're making to the creative team to design your campaign and brand tone of voice? What is the budget that you are willing to spend for this? And then finally, what are the KPIs you're going to be using? So even though I stayed a little bit at a high level, why, how, and what, the reality is there's a lot of subsections underneath. But these are the three pillars that I believe would really help you build a robust brief.
Great. One of the other ones, I think it was number 4, was about go-to-marketing, right? Go-to-market planning and really owning the process for both planning and execution. Mm-hmm. One areas that I see organizations struggle with is sort of the depth of understanding of the various tactics they expect from product marketing, right? How deep is the expertise in any one of those? How deep should their digital marketing or social aspects or whatever it be versus how they partner with other marketing communication resources that do it. So you can just expand a little bit on how you see that connection point between kind of defining the process, but being able to balance that with the expertise that lives in some of the specialists. I would love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say, it's really critical that product marketers in today's 21st century marketing organization needs to do is get familiar with all the different channels at their disposal. There are really 3 buckets of channels. You have own channels. These are the channels that your business or corporation or startup own that you don't pay to actually use. For example, your social media handles, your organic social media, your website, your email channel. If you have an app, your in-app messaging, text messaging, and if you have a blog, your blog channel. So own channels, the PMM needs to understand all of them and when to apply each one of them. They don't need to be experts in how to use them. In today's 21st century marketing organizations, you'll have an expert that actually owns, for example, the CRM strategy. But you need to know the value that each channel brings. The second bucket is what we called earned channels. Earned channels are channels that you earn through briefing the press, doing a press release. You can go and give keynote talks and be invited to talk shows or to conferences, and you basically evangelize the brand. These are channels that you've earned by word of mouth. And then the third one is where you spend most of your money. I would say probably 90% of your budget, which is paid channels. This is where you do social media advertisement, you do search advertisement, you do influencer marketing, you do TV ads, radio ads, out-of-home advertisement. It's basically the combination of everything where you have to spend $1 to get a word out. Now, again, you don't have to be an expert in any of these channels, but you need to be the voice of customer, basically knowing which channels will be effective for the target audience you're targeting. I'm going to give you an example. When I first joined Uber, we were targeting business travelers, and we're about to launch a campaign to target business travelers. And what I've learned through research that I've done with our teams is that there are 4 types of business travelers. The jet setters, these are C-level people that travel frequently with first-class flights and so on. You have the road warriors. These are consultants or salespeople that are constantly on the road. You have the locals that only travel within the city, like lawyers and accountants. And then you have the new newbies, the entry level people that just joined the workforce. And what we found is that, for example, jet setters, they don't follow social media from our company. They tend to get their information when they travel, either airport ads or in-flight magazines. While road warriors, they follow our channels mostly to see if we can give them points or credits. And they also follow influencers that talk about points. As an example, so knowing this, we knew that if we're building a solution that is a premium solution and we're targeting jet setters, we know the exact channels that we want to build a campaign around. And then if we're targeting road warriors with a loyalty program that we're creating, we know exactly the channels that we want to target them with. For example, we can use the points guy to actually build an affiliate marketing campaign with them. And I think this is the role of PMM. It's not exactly knowing the technical specifications on how to execute on the channel, but knowing which channel will be effective to your audience so they can build the plan and collaborate with all these different channel managers and execute on it.
That was a great explanation. One more area I want to double dip on, because I know my audience and I've got a lot of product managers that also listen to this. And I'm pretty sure in some of the earlier areas, there was a few of them had the hair standing up on the back of their neck thinking, wait, I own that piece, right? Can you talk a little bit about the handoffs that you have either at Uber or just like in your career that you see where there are really successful partnerships between product management and product marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I normally tend to say when I work with product managers and product ops. So this is a new term that a lot of tech companies use: product ops, product operations. I tend to see it as almost like the three of us, the product marketer, the product manager, and the product ops. We're kind of like the board of a startup, where the CEO of the product is the product manager. The product ops person is the COO of the product, and we are the CMO of the product. And basically, we all have the same goal, which is how do we make sure that the product is successful, that we drive a lot of product adoption, growth, and usage. And there will always be fine lines where, for example, product management will say, I need to work with UXR in testing a few concepts and validating if I need to use a different feature in our current product. And that's totally fine. And sometimes we will be talking to customers, we'll uncover needs that could be fulfilled with a different feature. And so we bring those in. And so I think the key success metric to avoiding territorial conversations is just have an open, collaborative environment where everyone adds to the table. So if I'm building a marketing campaign and marketing message and I'm creating the brief, I'm going to include the product manager of that particular product in the brief review, even though, it doesn't have to, because it's our brief, marketing owns it, and marketing is doing the campaign. But I want him to feel part of it and contribute, because I want him to feel like he is the CEO of the product and he should contribute to it, knowing that we are the experts in marketing, but he has something to say. Because in turn, when he's trying to think about his roadmap, he's going to include us as well, because he knows we are the voice of customer and we have something to add to his roadmap. And so it's all about integrating everyone in your, and of course, you don't want to delay. So when I build a brief, I include people as reviewers, but I don't necessarily need them to sign off on the brief, because otherwise, if you constantly wait for people, you just delay the whole process. So less is more in terms of getting things done, but make sure that they feel like they're included, even in things like just naming the product. A lot of the times, product managers complain that they build a product, they have an internal project name for the product, and suddenly marketing comes up with a different name when they launch it, and they had no saying in it. I think it's a mistake, because imagine you built a product from the ground up and you're attached to that product. It's your baby, and suddenly someone else decides what you're going to call your baby. That wouldn't be fun. And so what I always say is, like, include them throughout the whole process of your launch plan, your research, and in turn, you'll see that they will retribute, like they will basically return the favor, unless they're bad product managers.
That's great, right? You demonstrate the collaboration and you start to, I think, but it's always trust too, right? So when they see value that you bring, it's easy for them to include and vice versa, right? When you see the value that they can bring into the product marketing processes too, then it's easy to see why those loops are great. Okay, so we talk about those are the 10 things you should do well, and it talks a little bit about the things that bad PMs do. When you think, or bad PMMs do, you think about mistakes that companies make about product marketing. What do you see?
Yeah, and so I kind of touched what I think bad PMMs do normally, but I think what I've seen is a lot of mistakes that normally companies make, and product marketing is part of that, of course. The two main mistakes that I see often, and I in the beginning of my career, I was also guilty of that. The number one is starting with a what. Like I said before, the why is the foundation for everything you do. When companies start with a what normally will happen is that your message won't stick. It won't stick because there's no close relationship between product and the audience. It just feels like a very technical explanation of what you're trying to do. So it's almost like product feature centric messaging or product feature centric campaign, as opposed to the true benefit of what the product can do for you. And so this type of narrative tends to be very mechanical, spec oriented, does not really emotionally connect with your audience. So studies actually found that, and this is been proven for a while now, that when people are making purchasing decisions, even in B2B, a lot of the times, most of the times, they lead with emotions rather than logic. And I know that there tends to be this assumption that B2B is more logic and consumers are more emotional. Even in B2B, the person making a decision is a human being, and a lot of the times it's an irrational decision that they're making. So trying to always lead with technical specifications and try to always lead with logical arguments is not the right approach. In B2B, you need to do a blend of both. In B2C, you tend to drive a lot more with emotional messaging. So that's why I would always recommend think about your why, build your campaign, product, and messaging around the why. There was a report I read somewhere that companies that actually start with the why across their product portfolio, messaging, and brand often are rewarded with higher customer loyalty and can generate 5 times more revenue than the direct competitors. So 5 times more revenue. That's because they're building a connection that for these customers, it's very hard to break. Apple does this really well. Apple is all about emotional connection. And other companies that try to beat Apple, they try to go on spec and they often lose. The other thing that I think a lot of companies make a mistake is the idea that one size fits all. And I see this over and over again when product marketers assume that everyone will understand their message. And even if they have indeed started with a why, it so happens that your message doesn't always resonate with every single audience. Reason number one is that they assume the market is homogeneous. And that assumption is really dangerous. So they assume that everyone behaves and feels the same way. And therefore, their message, even if it starts with the why and it's based on insights, they assume it's going to be impactful to everyone. So that's a mistake because never assume everyone is your audience. You will have a clear audience if you do your research and you really truly drive insights. You can understand that your total addressable market may be quantified by strategy, but in reality, your product does not address the whole market. So even if your whole market is $2 billion, that doesn't mean your specific product, your specific narrative is going to address the whole $2 billion market. So it's really important to ground your strategy on a clear segment, on a clear persona, and in that way will be more effective.
One of the things that we've talked about, and you've brought up a couple times, right, is the importance of product marketing in the development of sort of the value prop, that key product messaging.
Yeah.
Let's go a little bit deeper on that and talk about what makes great messaging.
Yeah, I love this one. I am very passionate about messaging. I think there are two, I wouldn't call it secret, but I would say two key elements or ingredients, let's call it ingredients for great storytelling. Number one, great messaging isn't about good storytelling. It's about telling a true story well. And that's really key. That means it's not about creating a fancy story that sounds great. It's about uncovering the truth, relentlessly uncovering the truth, and then telling that truth really well. That's the number one thing. It's like, that's what makes great storytelling. Number two, you need a story arc. You can't just basically put together a story that doesn't follow a consistent flow. You need to have a nice story arc. And I said this just to many people in the past. We often forget as marketers that we all grew up with stories. I mean, I'm assuming, obviously I'm generalizing here, not all of them grew up with stories, but the majority of people as kids, we hear stories. We hear our parents tell us stories, we read books. And I would say 95% of these stories always follow a same story arc. And that story arc is, there's a crucible, there's relatability, there's the antagonist and protagonist, and the premise, AKA moral of the story. So the crucible is really the situation. It's really setting the situation to help you imagine in your mind the particular context of where that story is taking place. Relatability is when you bring that story to my level and it's not too abstract. The antagonist is basically the villain of the story. In other words, the problem, the challenge that you're facing. The protagonist is the hero of your story. In other words, it's your product, your company, your brand. And then the premise or moral of the story is actually your elevator pitch. Like, in summary, this is what we do. So here's an example that I've done at Siemens. When I was at Siemens prior to Uber, we were introducing a device that could image really large patients, like patients that had, were classified as obese with a BMI above 35. These patients are really hard to image. So what is the crucible? Obesity is increasing, and 2/3 of the US population are classified as obese, with 1/3 being classified as morbidly obese. So that's your crucible. That's the context. However, I'm selling an ultrasound device and I'm an ultrasound doctor, physician. It still doesn't connect to me because, yes, I know about obesity. I know it's a problem. Why should I care? That's the relatability part of the story arc. Well, across all the different imaging devices, ultrasound has the highest number of false positives when imaging obese people because it cannot penetrate deep enough through all the fatty tissue to give you a clear picture. So now I'm listening because now, as the ultrasound doctor, yes, it's true. Yes, obesity is a problem, and I 100% relate to that because we can never image an obese patient with ultrasound. Then you introduce the antagonist. Traditional ultrasound imaging is limited in the amount of energy it can transmit that allows you to penetrate deep enough and get a clear picture of what's going on in the liver or what's going on in the kidneys, for example. The antagonist here is the villain. The villain is all the other systems that exist in the market. Now you introduce your hero, your protagonist, which is your system. We built a system that helps you to penetrate up to 40 centimeters. Now you can get a clear picture no matter the size of the patient. So what's the premise? Obesity is an epidemic. Extraordinary people require extraordinary imaging. Current technology does not allow for extraordinary imaging. We built a solution that gives you extraordinary imaging so you can image every extraordinary patient. So that's really summarizing all of it. If you apply this story arc, it really works. And I've done this over and over again. It is not always intuitive because to think about a villain, an antagonist or a protagonist, it just feels abstract because you always think about this particular evil vampire or dragon that kidnapped the princess, right? But in reality, if you're trying to solve for a problem, that problem is the villain. That's why you're telling the story, because you're telling the story that exists in whatever customer segment you're targeting, and you're solving it with a hero, which is your product, your brand, your company.
Slaying dragons. That's what we do.
There you go.
One of the things you said, which really resonated, was that it's not just telling a story; it's telling a true story. And I think when it's done well, it's you telling your true story of your brand, and it shouldn't sound like it could be anyone else's brand. Mm-hmm. And so when you see it done well, it really pops out to you. And obviously, though, we all have. I always call it I say, oh, that story is 100% buzzword compliant, right? It gets all of the catchphrases. We've all seen that, right? When we're not building a story and we're throwing features or other words. If you could banish one phrase or word from product messaging for all of eternity, play it like a dragon, what would it be and why?
If I could banish one word from product messaging, that word would be product. Because great product narratives are never about the product. They're always about the audience. It's about how the product makes them feel, makes them act, react, how their lives will be so much better because now they have this product, service, or solution. Bad product narratives tend to focus on the product, these features, superior technology. We have 5,000 pixel density. We have 5K resolution. So what? It's superior tech means nothing to me if you're not solving for something that I need or care. So here's a hint. Your product isn't great if you need to explain it in your message, how great your product is. So in other words, the product, is a means or is the means for a desired outcome or state of mind for your customer. If you can't communicate that in your narrative, then your product will not capture your audience's attention. The biggest mistake marketers really make is basically thinking that people will want to buy or use your product because it's new. And that's absolutely wrong. People only want to own new or buy new services because of the feeling, the state of mind, the experience, the perceived status of owning those things, right? It's not always about the feeling, or it is about the feeling, because sometimes just having a Ferrari somehow gives you a perceived status, and that makes you feel good in whatever community you live in. Great product marketers don't tell a story about the shiny new object and how innovative or disruptive it is. No, they let their customers tell that story. Great product marketers tell a story about how your life will be better, different, or unique because of this object. And this is why you always need to ground your messaging in a deep understanding of your target audience, like what they really want, how they behave, what their needs, what are their pain points, their lifestyle. And when you know this, that's when you can start to build a narrative, a message that truly relates to their lifestyle and is less about the product, it's more about them.
Vanishing product. I like it. All right. 2020 was a different year for all of us. It certainly changed a lot of different things. And I think it did evolve product marketing, and it involved messaging a little bit. If you were to take a look at where we are now after in the midst of this pandemic, after all the changes, what are your predictions? What do you think 2021 is going to bring? Although we all know after the last year, predictions can be a little dangerous. But tell me, from a product marketing perspective, what are your predictions for 2021?
Yeah, I think product marketing will become even more influential within an organization, certainly within marketing, but within an organization. As I mentioned earlier in our conversation, for the longest time, the evolution of marketing has been slow and steady. But over the last 20 years, marketing has evolved more than the first 200 years combined. And so product marketing plays a key role in ensuring that with all these new technologies, these new channels, these new different audiences, because if you think about it, this is really something that I learned the other day. It took 50 or 60 years. I don't remember quite the number now, but it took, let's say 50 years for airlines to get to 50 million passengers. It took another 50 years, I think, for automotive companies to get 50 million active drivers. And it took Uber 6 years to get to 50 million active users. Wow. And that's because technology today allows us to reach people a lot quicker and always be on. You're getting notifications. I'm speaking to you and I'm getting notifications left and right. And a lot of them are marketing. And so how do you balance all of this? How do you, in a hyper-specialized environment where customers are being inundated with so much, how do you help to polish a launch plan, a go-to-market plan, so that it's effective, it's not just noise, and it actually helps organizations to really attract and reach more people? That's the role of product marketing. So I am certain that product marketing will become more influential. And now that 2020 really changed a lot for us, and we don't quite know that yet, but I'm certain that we will be thinking at different segments and different markets in different ways. Like, for example, virtual meetings, which was a thing that most people did once in a while and didn't even have the camera on, now is the must, and you just do it. Same thing with delivery, right? Today, even when the pandemic is over, sure, you want to go back and sit down at restaurants because it's great. The experience is fantastic. But how many times will you do that? If you're pressed for time, you just want to have the food delivered to your home. And prior to 2020, you probably didn't even think how reliable a platform like Uber Eats could be. But now, it is reliable, and you probably want to keep doing it even post-pandemic. So what I'm trying to say is behaviors and preferences have changed, and we don't know how much they have changed and what kind of behaviors you should be watching out for new verticals and new opportunities. So this is where product marketing comes in. We will talk to the audiences, we'll do research, we will uncover insights that can help us understand, like, the market is reopening. What is the best way to help companies reopen the market? What is the best way? What's the best narrative to put out there? Did we see that, consumers or businesses have shifted some of their behaviors? And is there an opportunity for us to build new solutions? This is where product marketing can shine. And I believe as we enter 2021, still in the midst of a pandemic, where new normals are still being determined, product marketing is going to help organizations really measure customer sensitivity, willingness to pay, size new segments, optimize costs, and truly think of a new way to position your brand in this post-pandemic world.
All right, Francisco, we talked a lot of different things today. If you were going to have our listeners do 2 things differently tomorrow based on what we talked about today, what would it be?
I would say don't make customer obsession a buzzword. Truly, truly live it. And that means really always putting your customer hat on. It's very easy for us to become very internally centric. And so always think about what would the customer do or react. And if you don't know that, learn it. Go and find out. There's multiple ways you can do it. If you have a large research team, great. You can use UXR. You can use marketing research. You can use, data science. If you don't have that, if you have a sales team, use your sales team to shadow them and talk to customers. If you don't have a sales team, no problem. Use SurveyMonkey. It's really cheap, and you can actually reach a bunch of people very quickly and just get some signals. So that's the number one thing I would say. Live up to being the voice of customer. Don't just make it a buzzword. And number 2, this is something I learned when I was really young in my career. I read a book called 212 Degrees. And it's a really simple concept. Water is really hot at 211 degrees. With 1 extra degree, 212, water vaporizes. With vapor, you can power a locomotive. With a locomotive, you can move people and goods. So the point here is all it took was 1 extra degree. And so the concept is really simple, which is in everything you do as product marketers, always look at how can you add the extra degree of value to all the functions you partner with, whether it's product management, whether it's sales, marketing. You can do the bare minimum, which is do what you're supposed to, but great PMMs stand out over time because every single time they add that extra degree of effort and they have built a reputation, a credible reputation over time. And that's why they get to expand their responsibilities, get promoted, or simply even get hired by or headhunted by other companies. So those will be the 2 things. Live up to the voice of customer and always look out for how you can contribute to the extra degree of effort.
All right, Francisco, this was a genuine pleasure today. I really appreciate having you on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, that does it for today's episode. Thanks everyone for listening. And don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.